Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Dean Tucker, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to use Lightroom Mobile Presets. So Dirtyboots and Messy Hair just launched their latest mobile preset pack, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to test them out. Alright, so jumping into Lightroom Mobile. In light of this tutorial, I've prepared a few shots for each of the new presets. And just on a side note, these are Lightroom Mobile presets, so they are especially designed for mobile phone shots. Therefore, most of these shots are mobile shots to show you just how nice these presets and edits actually come out. So, how do you use Lightroom Mobile Presets? Let's get into it. So starting with this first image of a really beautiful canal with these old beautiful aesthetic buildings. So just to start off, as you all are here for seeing how to use Lightroom Mobile Presets, you'll see the toolbar on the bottom of your screen over here. And if you just scroll all the way to the right hand side, you'll see a little tab for presets. Just hit that button and it'll bring up the groups of presets you have. You might end up on the default, which is the color. So you just want to click on that arrow next to the color and there'll be a drop down menu of all the different groups of presets you have. If you have installed previous groups already, you'll see them right at the bottom. In my case, I've installed the Dirtyboots Messy Hair preset, so I'm going to click on that. Then you'll see the list of different presets you have, and for this image I'm going to choose DB01. That should then be applied to your image and you can just hit the check button to go on to the next steps. So once you've got your preset applied, it's time to move on to the basic settings. And where we can find this is by scrolling all the way back to the left, and then I like to start off with the light settings, and this is just where you find your exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, whites and blacks. So while these are your basic light settings, you also have your basic color settings, which can be found in the color tab. This is where you can find your temperature, your tints, your vibrance and your saturation. So to start off by making a few adjustments to this image, I really like the golden light that's coming through those buildings, and I really want to emphasize that with the edit. So the first thing I'm going to do is just bring up the temperature ever so slightly. You don't want to be too aggressive with it, otherwise it can look a bit unnatural if you push it too fast. So I'm going to stop it at around 8 or 9, that looks good for me. And already we can see how it's giving it a warmer feel. Up next, I'm going to go to the light section once again, just to these basic settings. And I think the sky and the whites are very bright. So I think I'm going to start by bringing down these whites quite considerably. And just a trick for using these sliders, if you hold down one of your fingers on the screen at the same time as moving the slider, you can see it brings up this red and black screen, and this shows you the parts of the image that are a bit blown out and too bright. So I'm going to bring these whites like almost all the way down, and already we can see that a lot of the detail in the highlights and the whites are being retained. This is just my personal preference. I do like to see a lot of the detail in the highlights, so I like to bring that down. I'm also going to bring the blacks down just a little bit more, giving it some more of that contrast, so around minus 64, 65. And then like I said, just to emphasize that warm color, I'm going to come over to the color section, click on the mix where you'll find your HSL tab. This stands for hue, saturation and luminance. The hue is the specific color range, if you want to call it that. The saturation is obviously the brightness of a specific color, and then the luminance is how dark or how light that specific color is. So for this example, I'm going to go over to the orange and just bring up the saturation of that orange, and we can see how very specifically the color orange is saturated. There's also a bit of yellow in this picture, so if we click on the yellow, we can bring the hues down into that orange light instead of having that yellow that we had before. So you can see if I swipe over to the right and the left, if we look at this building on the left, how it goes from almost a greenish yellow to a much nicer warm orange feel. Lastly, I'm going to come over to the effects tab and just bring up the clarity ever so slightly just to make the details pop. And that is our first photo, looking pretty good from the start to the finish, just with a few minor edits, really bringing out that nice warm glow to the image. So up next we have this wonderful portrait in a nice deserty scene in front of a really cool Airstream caravan. And for this one we are going to swipe over to the presets once again and use DB02. Just straight off the bat, already brightening this photo up a lot more. I think I do want to add a bit more contrast to it though, so I'm going to go over to the light section and just bring that contrast up ever so slightly, just making the whites a bit brighter and the blacks a bit darker. But then I also do think that I want to bring these whites down a bit. They are just a bit much for me right now, so I'm just going to bring that down to around minus 66. And then I'm also going to bring the blacks down just a bit to darken up that photo. Up next, just like the other image, I really want to emphasize that warm glow to the photo, so I'm going to come over to the color section and then just slide up the temperature ever so slightly. Once again, not overdoing it, coming up to about +5. That is looking good for me. And then I also want to bring the tint down into this greeny section a little bit, maybe not too much. I'm also going to go to about -2, but we can see that it gives it a nice green tint to it, giving that really travel adventure feel. But if you're looking for more of the pinkish scale, you can go over to the right, but like I said, I want to go for about -2 on my tint. Lastly, I'm going to come over to the mix, go over to the oranges, and I just want to bring those oranges a bit more into the neutral side, bringing it up to 0. I'm going to click done on there, and the last thing I think that needs to happen is this crop is just not perfectly aligned, neither is the horizon straight, so I'm just going to swipe all the way over to the crop tool, and if we just touch on the bottom here and rotate this image ever so slightly, we can use the wooden boards on the bottom as a reference. It does crop off by feet just a little bit, but that's all good. I'm also going to bring this down to the rule of thirds by having the top third line on the edge of the caravan. If we click the check on that, that is done, looking good, ready to go. So once again, if we flick between the before and after, we can see how the before is a lot more dull. There's not really a nice glow to it. The colors aren't popping, but after the edit, it's looking so good. I really love this edit. Up next, we have this beautiful picture of an island. Just look at those colors in the water. Don't you want to be chilling on that island so hard right now? I wish I was there, but we can't win them all. We'll get there one day. But to start off, I'm going to start with DB3 on this one already, just with one click. Look at that, the preset bringing those colors to life and really making the image pop. There's really like not much more you can do to this image, but if you do want to play around with it, play around with the colors per se, go over to the color section, go to the mix, and this is just my personal preference, but I'm going to go over to the blue section and just bring down the saturation of that ever so slightly, as well as the luminance. But like I said again, this is just my personal preference. I like having desaturated blues in my photos, but you may like it nice and bright and really pumping up those colors. But as of right now, that image looks really good. If you do want to play around with it a bit more, you can go over to the teal section where we find this water around the island a lot closer, and here's just an example of how much the hue can do to the photo. If we bring that all the way up to the right, we can see how it gets a lot more blue, but if we take it all the way to the left, it's looking a lot more green. So if you like more of the blues in your photos, that teal blue instead of the green, then you can just swipe that a bit over to the right and you can click done on that, and it is good to go, ready for posting. But that is an amazing image, and again, just super quick, nice and easy to edit that photo and bring out those colors in the ocean. Up next, we have New York, New York. To start, I'm going to go over to the presets once again, and for this one we are going to be using DB4. Already with one click, we can see how it gives the image a lot more contrast, bringing up the shadows as well and giving it a nice warm glow. As this image is taken at sunset, I do want to emphasize that warm glow once again, but before we get there, I think we need to go over to the light section and just bring down that exposure a very little bit, just because I think the image might be a bit too bright, but that looks good. And then I'm also going to bring these highlights down just to retain the detail in the sky as well as on some of the buildings. As I said already, this image is taken at sunset, so I really want to emphasize those colors. So I'm going to bring up this temperature again, not too much, but maybe just so we start getting that glow in there up to around 11, 12. That seems good to me, but we can see that this glow that we are getting is quite yellow, and again, just personal preference, I really like an orange glow over a yellow glow. So just to fix this, we can go over to the mix tab, go to the yellows, and then we can see with this preset, the yellows are more over to the green side than the orange side. So all you need to do is drag the slider over to the left into those orange hues, and we can see how to adjust the image accordingly. Lastly, in my opinion, this is a very filmic image, and I like to bring up the grain on some of my images. So I'm going to go over to the effects tab, just scroll all the way down, and you'll see an option for grain. I like having quite a lot of grain in my images, so I like to bring that up to around 50, and then I also bring the size up quite a bit just to give it that film look. So that looks good to me. If we flick between the before and after, we can see how once again we've just given it that really nice warm sunset glow with a nice filmy look to the edit. Up next, we have another beautiful canal shot with the sunset just popping in the sky, and I'm going to be using DB5 for this one. So if we scroll down to DB5, apply that, we can already see that it's given the blues a bit more of a teal color, also brighten up the highlights quite a bit. We do seem to be losing some of the sunset though, but we can correct that with a few editing adjustments. So first things first, I'm going to come over to the color section and just bring this tint all the way over to the magenta side, giving it that nice pinkish pop that you would usually see in a sunset. I'm then also going to bring these highlights down just a bit. As we can see, it's a bit blown out in the sky and we're losing a bit of the detail in the clouds. So bringing those highlights down, and then I'm also going to bring the exposure down just a little bit, and we can see how we're already getting some of that detail back in the sky. I'm also just going to bring these blacks down just a little bit to make it seem natural. So one of the main features to this photo is the sky, so I really want to make these colors pop. So I'm going to go over to the color section, scroll down to the vibrance, and bring that all the way up to around 40, but I'm also going to bring the saturation down just a little bit so it doesn't look too unnatural. And then this is where it gets really interesting. If you really want to play around with these colors, you just come over to the mix section once again. You have all the colors to play with, especially with a sunset like this where the colors are just popping in every inch of the picture. Just as an example, if we go over to the blue and you want to play around with that hue, you can see how it makes a huge difference to this photo. So you don't want to overdo it. Once again, editing is really just about small changes that make a big difference. So for me, I'm personally going to bring this down into around -20 into that teal range, and that looks good for me. That's enough. I don't want to make it look too crazy, but you can go nuts if you really want to. So once again, the before and after, a really dull, I wouldn't say boring, but not popping sunset original picture, to the edit making it look epic and really bringing out those tones in the sky. Moving on to the Greek islands of Santorini. If you haven't been there already, I would highly recommend it. But as of this image right now, I'm going to go to the presets once again, and this will be DB06. Just straight off the bat, brightening up that photo, bringing out the vibrance of the oranges and the blues, making it look so good, once again, with one click. At a first glance, there's not much to do to this image, but I maybe just want to bring these highlights down a bit more to retain a bit of detail in the bright parts of the image. And then if you really want to mess around with a bit more of the color, you can come over to the effects, head over to split toning, and put a bit of warmth into the highlights, just bringing that saturation up on the reddish orange scale of things, and then bringing it a bit of cool blues into the shadows, not doing it too much. And that just adds a nice tint and grade over your image. But for the sakes of this photo and the location it's in, Santorini is really known for its blue and whites. So I'm not going to be using the split toning with this image, but we can use it for the next image. Before we move on though, the before and after of this one, once again, just a dull standard iPhone image from before, but after applying the preset, it really brightens that up and makes the colors pop. And last but not least, we have our 7th image, chilling with the elephant, looking majestic and adventure-y. We are going to be using DB07 on this one, and just from applying it already, we can see that it gives it a nice brown adventure-y feel, fading the image just a bit. I do think that I'm going to head over to the light section and bring down the exposure just a little bit. It's a bit bright for my liking, not too much, that looks good. And then I'm also going to bring up the contrast just a bit as well to about +10. Up next, I'm going to go over to the color and the mix, and I like to bring down the saturation on my greens. Again, this is just personal preference, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you really want to make those greens pop, then you can bring that saturation all the way up. But like I said, personal preference, I'm going to bring the saturation down as well as the luminance, and that is looking good to me. Like I said in the last image, we use split toning. For this one, I really am going to use it. So I'm going to go over to the effects tab, click on split toning, and what I really want to emphasize with this is that travel adventure feel. And to me, I don't know why, but I really like adding browns to my shadows when going for that green and brown look. So just go over to the shadows, click on the palette over here, and just drag that saturation up in the orangey red section over here, and we can see that it adds a nice brown split tone to the image. And lastly, I'm going to stay on the effects section, scroll all the way down to the grain, and just bring it all the way up for that nice texturous adventure feel. Looking so good. That is so nice. I would post that on my Instagram like right now. But there we go. That is that. How to use Lightroom Mobile Presets. That was so quick and easy to use, and editing literally only took a few clicks. So needless to say, I will definitely be using this app a lot more, and I really enjoyed editing these photos with my brand new presets. So that wraps up that. I hope you guys did enjoy this video and you learned something useful. These presets were just so nice and quick and easy to use, and we ended off with great results. So if you would like to check out the presets yourself, please head over to the Dirtyboots and dirtybootsandmessyhair website where you can purchase and download them. But in saying that, I'm going to end today's video here. Once again, I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have an amazing day going forward. Enjoy the editing of your brand new mobile presets, and in the meantime, remember to stay weird, don't die, and make it happen. I'll see you guys in the next one.